Hi, today I'm here with Ann Garcia. She is known as the College Financial Lady. She's a fee-only fiduciary financial advisor who helps families plan and finance, get this, affordable college education. She's also the mom of two college-age twins, so she's right there with us. So thanks for being here with us. It is 7:30 for you, and so I'm always grateful when West Coast people are willing to come on an East Coast time. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I wanted to start with, when's a good time to start having the conversation? We talk a lot about finding a good fit and having we have many, many conversations about college, and often we're having conversations later in the game to parents who are later in the game. So, when do you think, as a finance person, we should start having conversations with our kids, and what do those conversations look like?
That's a great question because, as you said, so many people wait until senior year and they're like, "Oh, I have to find the perfect fit," and you don't have time for that when you're, senior year. I really think families should start talking with their kids about college at a really young age, and part of that's just my perspective as a financial advisor. Any large financial goal that our clients have, we want them to think about it for a while and plan for it for a while and save for it for a while, and it's hard to do that if it's not if it's not a topic that's front and center. But really, I personally think middle school is a great time to start talking to your kids about their own college. And there are a couple ways to think about this. One is just sort of framing the issue in general for your family. That we expect you to go to college or we want you to go to college. But the other is just, you have to make a plan for this, and you can't make a plan senior year and expect it to just pan out automatically. It's much easier to do that with a longer time horizon. And I think it's important to talk about college, not just from the perspective of we expect you to go or we want you to go or we think it would be good for you to go, but talk really about your values about education. Why your own college experience was important to you. What are the things that were really the valuable components of that experience? Not necessarily, I went to Berkeley or I went to Ohio State or I went to wherever, but I studied abroad.
Ohio State is not so popular today. They just lost.
Oh, my husband went to Michigan, so never popular in our house.
I have a split house. I have two who went to Michigan and one Ohio State. So
yeah.
lot of battling there.
Yeah.
So when your kids hit the point of middle school, did you change your mind on the advice you'd been giving? Like, did you go, wow, this is really hard to talk to an 8th grader about college? Or were you able to practice what you preached?
We were really fortunate that when my kids were in middle school, they were in this program at our middle school where they had kind of one group for all their classes, and we did a whole bunch of outings with them. And one of the moms in the class was a college professor, and she invited them to her campus for the day and had them, go to a class and tour the campus and, really fully engage in student life for a day at her school. So that was really a great stepping off point for having that conversation. But it's not a hard conversation to have. I mean, we watch college football and we talk about why we watch our school's teams. We talk about things that we do that are, relevant to the fact that we went to college. I think one of the things that was a struggle for me as a parent, and this is going to make me really unpopular if anyone I know is listening, was that I was not a big fan of our in-state public schools, and I really wanted my kids to have other choices. And and when I started looking at what that meant when they were that age, I thought, this is something that's going to require some work and especially some homework. And I'm fortunate, I would have, my opinion has since changed. I would have been perfectly happy for my kids to stay in state because our in-state public schools do have some great programs. But at the same time, I'm really thrilled that they had opportunities to go elsewhere for comparable costs.
Okay, so how do you approach the conversations about money? And even as a starting point, what do I need to know about my finances to be able to make any kind of assessment about what we could afford?
Yeah. So, I think there's really two pieces to it. One is just looking at, hey, what can, what can we actually, what can we actually afford? How much savings do we have? How much could we pay out of cash flow? Are we okay with our students taking out direct student loans? Are we eligible for any of the tax credits? And really adding those numbers up and saying, okay, every year, this is what works for our family. And then the second piece of that is looking at what's out there and what your choices are. If that annual number is small, then you're probably looking at things like, where are schools where all my AP credits are going to transfer so I could be done in 3 years? Or do my state schools have a dual enrollment program with community colleges where I could do the first 2 years at community college and then transfer over and finish? Can I live at home? What are the different options that are available to me, and how can we get through this in a reasonable amount of time? I mean,
so you share the stories about your own two kids because they're twins and you went through it at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went through? I mean, I think it's really fascinating because you had all this knowledge that you really applied it to how they figured out where they should go.
Yeah. So my twins are night and day opposites, especially when it comes to school. So it was interesting to see the two of them going down really different paths. My son was not much of a scholar in high school, and not that he wasn't smart, but he wasn't a good student. And we kept telling him, we're not going to put more into college than you put into high school. And he really didn't want to stay in state. He's always, when he went away to college, I gave him a picture of himself with the poem, "The Road Less Traveled," because he's always the guy who does his own thing. And so he just didn't want to, go in state where all his friends were. And he was fortunate that he did fabulously on the ACT, all on his own. And so he started looking around and to see, where else he could go that would cost about the same as staying in state. And we had stumbled across the University of Arizona on a family vacation, and he went on their website and he found out that his ACT score was going to get him a scholarship that was big enough that it was going to actually cost the same as going to University of Oregon.
So the University of Arizona has the information on their website that you can just plug it in.
Yeah.
Wow, that's dreamy.
Yeah, in fact, most public schools do, and I think one of the things that that families tend to overlook is that we tend to think, oh my gosh, well, there's either my state schools or private schools, but loads of public schools really aggressively recruit out-of-state students, and when I say aggressively recruit, I mean offer big scholarships.
And where do you look on the website? Where is that?
On their financial aid, or you just Google the school name and incoming freshman scholarships. And most of the larger public schools do give scholarships solely on the basis of grades and test scores, or this year grades. And so it ended up costing the same for him to go there. In fact, and one of the funny things when he got his offer from there, it looked like it was more expensive by quite a bit than staying in state. And so we said, Alex, why would we pay $5,000 a year more for the same thing? And he went back and realized that Arizona was quoting the highest priced dorm and the highest priced meal plan, and Oregon was quoting the lowest priced dorm and the lowest priced meal plan, neither of which were what he would actually choose. And so he realized that actually Arizona wasn't going to cost all that much more. And at Arizona, they guarantee your tuition for 4 years. So your tuition, once you're in, your tuition stays the same all 4 years. Whereas here in Oregon, it goes up about 6% every year. So it was fun to see him really take the lead on finding that, and he just couldn't be happier there. He's just been knocking it out of the park as a student there. He's got a 4.0 for 3 semesters now, which I don't think he had a 3.5 in high school.
Well, that's a great story. Your daughter also has a great story.
Yeah. So she's the opposite. She was a super ambitious, super hardworking student, full IB coursework, um, and all that. And she really wanted, we really felt like University of Oregon, our in-state public school, was not going to be a good fit for her. And so she and I spent a summer, not a whole summer, but we spent about a week and a half the summer before senior year, going and looking at schools across the East Coast and whatnot. And she had her heart set on a certain list of schools, and I was like, I want you to see a little more than just that. And the East Coast is great that way because you can do a lot in a very short time. So we went and did this crazy march through about 18 schools over the course of a week. And
ouch.
Yeah, and especially, we're here in Portland where it's, pleasantly warm in the summer, and it was, 95 and 100% humidity. And we're just marching through schools. I think 20,000 steps a day was our average.
Let's just point out that we know parents can't be doing this right now. So, it's a different story for people looking at schools right now, but I'm sure parents know already, there are virtual tours. It's not the same. There are ways to get around that. And actually, we're going to be talking to Ron Lieber on February 2nd, and you can come with your questions there about how you can get information about schools also. So back to Ann's story.
Yeah, so we went and saw all these schools, and she had a completely different impression after the fact of where she wanted to go. But our last stop was in Chicago, and her dream school at the time was Northwestern. We went to Northwestern. It was beautiful and fabulous, and she loved it. And then we went from there to U Chicago, and everything went wrong in between. We got rained on, we took the wrong train, our Uber driver got lost, he dropped us off in the wrong place at the school. And we finally walked in and got sent to a different place for our tour, and we sat down, and she just sat down in the seat, and before anyone said a word, she turned and looked at me and said, "Mom, this is the place for me." And then our tour guide ended up being her absolute soulmate. And so when she went through the application process, it's actually funny, her essay of why do you want to go to this school, for all the schools that she applied to, her opening sentence of it was, "My mom dragged me to your school to tour your campus." And while I was there, I learned X, and that's why I want to go there. So one of the great things that we discovered about U Chicago, compared with a lot of the other private schools that she was looking at, was that they were using the FAFSA and not the profile for their financial aid form. And so,
CSS, is that the difference?
Right. And like most families, our expected family contribution from the FAFSA was quite a bit lower from the profile. And U Chicago is a school that meets 100% of need. So ultimately, U Chicago ended up being her second cheapest choice. Her only cheaper one was University of Oregon, and she had a full tuition scholarship there. So it was, we were fortunate that we had also been saving over the years. So the difference between room and board only and a really, really nice package at U Chicago was something that we were able to do. But it did end up being her second cheapest choice of all the schools that she was accepted to.
And do you feel like when you work with families that you're able to get the same, like, so these stories, they sound particularly unique to your two kids. Are they so unique, or can other people have the same experience in terms of matching, I wouldn't say one school, but maybe several schools with what you can actually afford?
Yeah, I think there are so many good choices out there for schools, and there are a lot of good ways to find them. One of the things I would say, my son was absolutely a public school guy. He wanted to be at a big school. He loved the idea of football games, all that kind of stuff.
Which he's not getting.
Which he's not getting, but he did get one fall of football games. And he did all the homework himself to find his opportunities. So that's certainly there. With my daughter, so many private schools are very, very generous with financial aid, and not just, like I said, in the case of U Chicago, using the FAFSA versus the profile, but private schools are really known for giving a lot of merit aid. And it's fairly easy to research that. They'll generally list what scholarships you're going to be eligible for. But the other thing that's really an important piece of all of this is net price calculators. All schools are required to have net price calculators on their site, and you plug in your financial data and it'll tell you how much gift aid the school is likely to give you. We found that every offer my daughter got was within $2,000 of what the net price calculator had said. It was also really helpful in, explaining the difference between filling out the financial aid forms and actually getting financial aid, because the cost estimates that she got from different schools ranged from, $12,000 at the University of Oregon to $82,000 at another school that we visited that was not going to offer her any financial aid. So that can be really, that I think is the most helpful thing that families can do, is do those net price calculators up front, because you will see a huge range of prices just based on what schools offer and what your family situation looks like, whether they're
digging deeper, like your son dug deeper, right? So you wouldn't have found out the information he found out about because of his grades. And that's just like, right? The net price calculator is just based on your financial status.
It depends on the school. So there are some schools that give automatic merit aid, will ask in their net price calculator for GPA and test scores or class ranking. A lot of them don't. And so then it's a matter of just looking at what's offered. So for example, my daughter, one of the schools she applied to was Boston University. And we did the net price calculator and the number came back pretty high. And then she went and looked at what the merit scholarships that she might be eligible for were, and found a couple. And one of them was enough that it got within our budget. And so when we went through her list of schools she was applying to, we did this exercise of under what circumstances would you go there? And for her, Boston University was, she loved Boston, loved the Boston schools, and she was applying to MIT and Tufts as well. And so, Boston University was a school that she would go to in Boston if she didn't get into the other two. And the added criteria was if she got this particular scholarship, because that would bring it down to the level where.
So you set it up so that there were not going to be many surprises. Like, if this happens, then this is the result. And do you advise that to families when you're working with them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you have to know upfront what your budget is and where what you're willing to do, because otherwise, I see so many families just apply to schools all over the place willy-nilly and say, well, we'll just make it work when it happens. And the difference between a school that costs $12,000 a year and $82,000 a year is not a gap that most families can cover. And so to put yourself in a situation where it's possible that every school that your child is accepted to is outside of your financial reach, that just leads to terrible outcomes. People seem to think that it's so important to go to an elite college, that's gonna make you who you are. It is important to go to college and graduate from college for a lot of economic reasons. Across the board, higher lifetime earnings, higher entry level earnings, half the unemployment rate for college graduates than for non-college graduates. It is far less important what school you went to. One of the real negative financial outcome that comes from going to college is taking on too much debt to get your degree. But families who, students who take out the direct student loan all 4 years for college will graduate with a student loan payment of around $300 to $350 a month for 10 years, and then they'll be done with it. And the earnings differential between college and no college more than supports that payment. It does not support $1,000 a month in payments for 30 years.
And even better if you can be your kids and not have to come out with debt at all. if that's something that your family can figure out.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really, there's two groups of people who go to college that don't have good outcomes, and that's people who don't finish. And oftentimes they don't finish, for two big reasons. One is they can't afford where they're going, and the other is where they're going isn't a fit for them. And the other group that doesn't do well are people who take on too much student debt. But other than that, across the board, a college degree is an excellent choice. A specific college degree may or may not be an excellent choice. It could be a horrible choice for a lot of families if it's not affordable to them. But fortunately, there are lots and lots of tools out there to figure out what schools are going to be within reach for you, and net price calculators are a really good one.
So I think there was just in the news about the expected family contribution. There's some announcement. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so as part of the omnibus budget bill / stimulus bill that just got passed at the end of the year, there was about 170-page section called FAFSA simplification.
And everyone's dream words, FAFSA
right?
simplification.
And 170 pages of it, which I actually tried to slog through. It's not for the faint-hearted. So one of the big changes that's getting a lot of attention in this FAFSA simplification, in part because they haven't really described how the rest of it's being simplified, is that the expected family contribution is being renamed the Student Aid Index. And the expected family contribution is the number that when you plug all your data into the FAFSA, it spits out a number called your expected family contribution. That's based on your income and your assets. And it says, this is what the federal government thinks you should be able to afford for college. That has been renamed the Student Aid Index. And it's a cosmetic change, but it's a really good cosmetic change. So, because the challenge with calling something expected family contribution is people expect that that's what their family should be contributing to college. And very, very few schools actually meet full need. And those that are very, very competitive to get into. So I think it's a good change that we're calling it what it is, because really most schools use your FAFSA data and your expected family contribution as a means of assessing all students' financial health or strength on the same set of metrics. They do not use it to meet your need. And so that's what, so calling it Student Aid Index is really a step in the right direction. A lot of people have been there. Well, so there are a couple of big changes to the formula that are part of that. One is that they're changing the Pell Grant eligibility to be based on adjusted gross income rather than on expected family contribution. That's really nice because it lets a family know upfront if they're in line for a Pell Grant versus the arcana of going through the FAFSA and trying to figure out, do you have an EFC of less than 3,580 or whatever that number is that you really can't plan for until you actually do the FAFSA. Another change is they've increased the the income protection allowance for families. So most families will have less of their income assessed in the formula. Income is the far bigger piece of the FAFSA formula than assets. So that's a change that'll benefit most families. But another of the changes that's less beneficial for families, particularly like yours and mine who have multiple kids, is the expected family contribution is for your family. And so a family with multiple college students divides their expected family contribution over by the number of college students they have at a time. The Student Aid Index is solely based on, it's the same number for every kid in the family. So if your expected family contribution, let's say, was $60,000 and you had 3 kids in college at the same time, then in fact, each kid's share of that expected family contribution would be $20,000. With the Student Aid Index, that same $60,000 would be your $60,000 for each kid. So that's a little bit of an unfortunate thing.
Can I ask a question? If you have multiple kids in college at the same time, the Student Aid Index is going to harm you in potentially a very big way. Can you reach out to the schools? Like, can they make up the difference?
Yeah, I would absolutely encourage any family who's in that situation and who will still be in that situation 2 years from now, because that's when it goes into effect. So not this coming fall, but the fall after, that FAFSA will be the one that uses these new changes. It would be a fabulous idea to be in touch with your school and find out how they're going to do that. There's been a lot of talk about, this is going to cost families a whole lot more. Here's the thing. Most schools don't meet all of your need anyway. So this is just a different way of assessing that need. Most of the more expensive private schools have a lot of merit aid in their packages, outside of the very top schools that don't offer merit aid. And when it comes to those top schools, their most generous scholarships that are need-based are really based on family income. So, for example, if you, like at Stanford, I want to say if your income's below $65,000, you pay nothing to attend. If your income's below $150,000, you pay no tuition to attend. So that's not really based on the FAFSA or the CSS profile or your expected family contribution. It's based on your income.
And it's just tuition. It's not room and board, right?
The $0 for under $65,000, it's $0 cost of attendance.
Really, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And the Ivies are like that as well. They have income cutoffs below which you either pay zero tuition or zero total. But again, most private schools have merit aid as a big component of their package, and that has nothing to do with your EFC or your SAI.
Okay, last question. Are your kids home right now, or are they in person at school?
They just went back. So they both left on Friday, and they're back at school.
And how are they? Just tell us how they're holding up during the college experience through COVID.
Yeah, it's been really, really, they've both had really different experiences. So they're both sophomores. My son lives off campus in an apartment. And so he and his 3 roommates, they're all business majors. So, they sit in their living room to watch their lectures together. So it's a little bit like being in classes. And they have sort of a friend pod with the girls in the apartment next door. They had all planned to live together anyway. And then another group of friends. So they have their little group that they do things with. And that's pretty much it. But yeah, all of their classes are online. His school had some options for hybrid, but he felt like it would be less disruptive to just sign up for online classes than to be going back and forth between the two. One of the things that's really unfortunate at University of Arizona is they have this big open campus. It's a beautiful place to be, tons of open space and grassy areas. But because they don't have a statewide mask mandate and they are state land, they've been told that the university can't enforce its mask mandate in their outdoor common areas. And so they've had to rope off all of their open spaces, because my son and his friends were thinking, they could go over to campus and throw a Frisbee around and do stuff like that. But all of that is off limits because the university isn't allowed to enforce its mask mandate in their outdoor spaces.
Wow.
My daughter's experience has been really different. She's in the dorms. A lot of kids at UChicago live in the dorms all 4 years. And so she's in the dorms, and that has been, so long story is she's in this fabulous old dorm in the center of campus, and they converted everything to singles and then did their room lottery. And she got this amazing double room suite at the top of a tower with a bathroom that was shared with one other person. And it was going to be great. All of her friends had rooms like this. And 3 weeks before classes started, they were notified that dorm had been changed to their isolation housing for COVID students. So they got moved somewhere else. A bunch of her friends went and got apartments. And so now she's in a different dorm. It's way off campus. About half her friends are there. And UChicago has been really, really strict about COVID. All the students on campus get tested every week. They're all in single rooms. You're supposed to have a friend pod of 4 to 6 people, and those are the people that you can hang out with maskless, and no one else. but it's been a challenge. She's likewise taking all of her classes online. But one of the things that's really hard for teenagers and young adults is, when we were kids, we could choose our friends by who was fun to hang out with, and that the wild child was always a fun part of your circle, and even if they were a little reckless, that was often the person who got you, and who all the fun stuff. And that's not a person you can be friends with right now. Our kids are having to choose their friends based on who has shared values about personal safety and public health, and that's a hard place to be in as a 19-year-old. So my daughter, one of the kids in her pod is dating a guy who lives with someone who just isn't taking any precautions about COVID. And so that was a really hard thing for my daughter to have to choose between her, her personal health and her, and her group of friends. And
yeah,
that's the reality.
I do feel so badly for kids in college because they are just not getting the experience they're paying for.
Yeah.
So, Ann Garcia, thank you so much for being here with us today. And Ann gets a big shout out in Ron Lieber's new book, and that's how I connected with her. So thank you so much, and thank